What is up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Super Draft Breakdown Show, where I'm going to be talking all my favorite NBA plays over on Super Draft for today's slate. If you guys haven't signed up for it yet, making bad life choices, sign up using the promo code GRINDERS. Get a free $150 bonus if you deposit $150 plus. That's free money. Basically, you just play through it and it's yours. Not a drip system. It's just straight $150 if you deposit $150 or more. If you deposit less than that, it's matching up to $50. So make sure to get that full deposit bonus in there. Get the full $150 in there unless you can't afford it, but they'll match everything up to $50 if you can't. So absolutely fantastic deal. Overlay every single day on the site. Fantastic new format. Plus, I'm going to be giving you all the picks for today. May change a little bit, but generally it's going to stay the same throughout the course of the entire day. So I've got a spreadsheet taken down. I've got RG projections up. I've got everything we need to do. So I'll get you all the advice you need. Format, real simple. 3 guards, 3 forwards, 1 center. If you haven't played before, it's on a multiplier system. So however many points that person gets, multiply it by the multiplier, and boom, that's how many points they have. You can play anyone you want. No restrictions, just 3 guards, 3 forwards, 1 center. You can do 1v1 swaps. Someone gets ruled out. Last night, for instance, Derrick Rose gets ruled out. I just global player swapped over to quickly, and boom, that's it. That's all I had to do. Made it real simple with all the late news. Didn't help with Kawhi, but luckily I was under the field on Kawhi, so I ended up making some money last night. Almost hit it big, got close to winning it, but didn't happen. But fantastic site. They got GPPs. They got an $18 GPP, a $4 GPP, a $1 GPP, $30 single entry. They got cash games, triple ups, 3-man competitions, 10-man competitions. They got everything you need over there. Less rake on the cash games, only 3% rake compared to the normal 10% rake. Plus, on top of that, overlay on all their guaranteed contests almost every single day. You'll rarely find a day where there's not a decent amount of overlay over on SuperDraft. So get signed up, get in there, get the free $150, and get my advice right now. If you guys have any questions, anyone watching live, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Anything you have about SuperDraft, anything you want me to address, any player you want me to address. We have an interesting slate today, to say the least. Obviously, we're going to be without LeBron on today's slate. Already ruled out for rest. And so we have no LeBron, no Davis over on the Lakers. They're playing Sacramento. And I just want to talk about this right off the bat here. So I'm going to straight up go to the Lakers roster here, because much like in regular DFS, where salary is a huge thing, multipliers are a huge thing. So we look at the multipliers. The lowest one on the entire Lakers team is 1.65x. So there is a huge amount of upside for the Lakers, especially if guys like Caruso, Gasol, Kuzma end up getting ruled out. So we definitely have to wait on that advice. Again, nice thing is you don't have to worry about massive changes to your lineup over on Super Draft. It's pretty much whatever you've got at the before the start of the game. You can swap directly. If Kuzma gets ruled out, you can swap over to Morris. If Gasol gets ruled out and for some reason we're playing, you can swap over to Harrell. If Schroeder for some reason doesn't end up playing, you could swap over to Caruso, or Damian Lillard or Steph Curry. We've got 2 games late at night. So I think a lot of the slate is going to depend on what we decide to do and what you decide to do and what happens in the Lakers game. So we got Schroeder sitting there at 1.65. If you don't know what the color coding means, it's just simply the median, floor, and ceiling projections according to RG multiplied by the multiplier. And blue here, that's my cash game core. Green is my GPP core. So right now, Schroeder is a cash game lock for me. He's going to eat up a ton of usage without James on the floor, without Davis on the floor, in a premier matchup going up against Sacramento. He should be able to have his way with him, just score constantly up and down the court. So he's definitely interesting. He's a lock and load for me. We see a ceiling 90. Generally, what you're hoping for from each guy on any given night is right around 60 points. Like every single player in your lineup, you want right around 60 points. Occasionally, there'll be weird nights like last night. I'm going to actually pull up my lineup from last night. Last night was definitely a weird one. So all the chalk, which you get major chalk over on Fantasy Draft, all the chalk basically busted outside of LeBron. We had DeJounte Murray, one of the better chalk plays, still only ended up with 58 points. We had Quickly ending up with 7, but Julius Randle ended up with 44 points. Again, you're shooting for 60. Middleton, after the multiplier, ended up with 52 points. He was 30% owned. Giannis ended up with 47 points. He was 50% owned. Noel ended up with 47 points. He was 38% owned. Joker ended up hitting, which I mean, I was way over the field on him because he had a decent multiplier, but the chalk is very different on any given night. And it's very, very chalky because you can play anyone you want. You're not sacrificing something by playing one guy. Like, it's not a 2v2 swap. Salary's not a thing. So you can literally play anyone. You can have a lineup that is the exact same as the number one overall lineup on the site with one player different, and boom, be 30, 40 places down. So it is important to get every single thing right, or as many of them right as you can, at least 6 out of 7, if you're going to take down GPP. Cash, you can definitely end up getting there without having everything right. For instance, last night, I got lucky. I didn't have Kawhi in cash, and so he was 70% on cash. I knew that was going to cash regardless. Like, it just was real simple. Like, play as soon as that happened, made sure that I had all the chalkiest players in all my 50-50s, and boom, I knew I was going to win because everyone else had Kawhi, and there was no making up for that. So, yeah, that's basically how you play over on SuperDraft. But like I said, Lakers, very interesting tonight. I think that almost anyone's in play that's going to get minutes. Like, you can play KCP because over on SuperDraft, it's a mix between FanDuel and DraftKings scoring. So 3 points for a block or a steal, 3.5 points for a three-pointer, assist, rebounds, the same as DraftKings, double-double bonus, triple-double bonus, same thing as DraftKings. So KCP, because of his high multiplier and because of the needed usage in this offense, if you're not playing Schroeder and a guy like Kuzma, he's definitely someone you need to look at. Markieff Morris potentially could end up with a decent amount of playing time, could end up drawing the start. If not, Kuzma, he's going to be needed for a whole lot of scoring without LeBron in there. He could realistically have a 50-point game at a 1.7x multiplier. I'm planning on being way overweight on him. Montrezl Harrell, if Gasol gets ruled out, like, I know he did terrible last night. I don't understand what happened. I just kind of looked halfway through the second quarter, saw he was doing terrible, just pretty much stopped paying attention. So I haven't looked into it too much, but matchup versus Sacramento, horrible defensive team. He's a high energy guy that can do a whole lot. He could crush here. But any one of the guys that end up getting the starts, like, it's kind of based on the news. We won't know entirely if Gasol is going to play, if Kuzma is going to play. They're on the second end of a back-to-back. We haven't got news yet. The 11:30 injury report should give us a little bit more clarity on it. But assuming everyone plays, then Schroeder, Kuzma, if he gets the start, and Harrell are the top options. You can go with Markieff Morris, probably a spot where he could end up with 30 minutes just because of the lack of depth and the lack of players, and can do a lot on the offensive end, enough to get it done at a 2x multiplier. But that's kind of like the Lakers players I'm going with. But let's go ahead and look at all players here. Look at my cash game core. Look at my tournament core. We'll start off with center right now. So center, Vooch is the absolute chalk, and rightfully so. 1.25x is far too high of a multiplier for him. I know he's been a little bit up and down recently, but shown huge ceiling in any given game and a decent floor. This multiplier is too high. Matchup versus Atlanta, good matchup. Second end of a back-to-back for them. Absolutely some guy you should be thinking about in tournaments and lock in cash. Cat, more going to be using him as a forward, but you can definitely use him at center. 1.15x multiplier. He's a guy that is very much in play in tournaments, and he's probably a lock for me in cash. Then after that, it gets a little bit interesting. Can Capella outscore Vooch? Yes. Is he likely to? I don't think so. John Collins, second in the back-to-back, but decent matchup. Been getting more run recently. I think that he is a viable option, more at forward than he is at center. But realistically, in my center spot, I'm planning on using Vooch, and I'm planning on using Cantor. Cantor's at 1.55x multiplier. We look at the ceiling. He has the highest ceiling of any center on the slate because of that big multiplier, and because he is so hit or miss. He can be very good scorer. It's going to be a high-paced game. Golden State, obviously, a decent matchup for him. Like, they're not great defensively. He's going to be going up against Looney and Draymond and Wiseman. He can get some big games going up against Golden State. So we see his floor 20, median 54, ceiling is 83. So he can absolutely crush you, but you're kind of just assuming that Vooch is going to come in at, 80% owned, 70% owned. Most of the rest is going to be on Cantor. So you can kind of make your decisions in tournament. Do I want to go with the field? Do I want to correlate? Like, if I'm using Cantor, maybe have Lillard and bring it back with Curry or Draymond or Oubre or Wiggins on the other side, hoping for a close game there. It's kind of my plan is to be right with the field, maybe a little bit overweight on Cantor, but make sure it's in lines or lineups where I can kind of correlate things. So Cantor, absolutely in play, but center's pretty simple. In cash, you're 100% using Vooch. It's not even a question. Then you're probably just using these three other guys, but both Cat and Montrezl you can use at the forward spot. But it also gives you a little bit of mobility. If you're using Cantor, let's say you have two lineups with close to the same score, and the only guy left to play is Montrezl or Cantor, you can always swap to the other one, knowing that they have close to the same median outcome, but you're not going to end up in first with both those lineups. So kind of swapping off one to the other, or if you need room to make up, Cantor might be more chalky than Montrezl. So you can swap off of Cantor to Montrezl at the late games because there's 2 10 o'clock games. But that's pretty much center. Forward, a little bit more interesting. For cash, it's pretty simple for me. Luka, been on fire, crushing. I'm throwing him in at the forward spot. Cat, 1.15x multiplier, matchup versus Charlotte. Great matchup for him. I'm throwing him in at the forward. Zach LaVine, 1.25x multiplier. Good matchup against New Orleans. I'm most likely throwing him in at the forward. Cat and Luka right now are locks for me at cash. But third spot, I'm leaning towards LaVine, but I'm not going to argue with Zion or Ingram. Both of them, matchup versus Chicago. High-paced matchup, terrible defensive matchup. Either one of them can crush. So I'm not against using either of them as your third forward spot, or if you want to throw LaVine in the guard spot, that's also fine, although there's other guards I prefer. But either of these two, probably decent cash game spots. After that, it's mostly tournament guys. So Fournier, shown huge amount of upside if he ends up playing. A huge amount of upside in any given matchup. He's been chucking, been a little bit hit or miss. So we see his floor fairly low. Ceiling, absolutely massive. I plan on being overweight on him in tournaments. SGA eating up all the uses. Matchup against Dallas, not the best pace matchup, but they're horrible defensively. SGA is absolutely a guy that can end up getting there. Can crush on any given night. 1.25x multiplier. A little bit low, but still definitely gives you some upside. Already talked about Montrezl. Barnes, match versus the Lakers. We think not a good one, but also it's without LeBron. It's out without AD, so they can crush. They can absolutely crush anyone on Sacramento. It could be a much higher scoring game. Barnes pretty much seems to be under 25 points or over 40. He's a guy that gets a ton of usage. So if he gets hot, keeps going, he can end up with a pretty big night. I plan on using a bit of him in tournaments, mostly as a game stack, mostly hoping this game stays close. Game without LeBron and without AD is definitely a spot where this game can get out of hand on either side. It's really volatile, but the matchup is so good for the Lakers that I plan on bringing it back if I'm using multiple Lakers, because normally on this site, you don't want to use 2 guys from the same game with super low multipliers. You can use 3 guys with high multipliers in any given game, and this LA spot is the perfect spot where you can end up stacking up the game. Looking at chat here, pricing on SuperDraft is anytime that there's bad pricing, that just gives you an edge in a lot of scenarios. Knowing volatility, knowing ownership, you can help out. But like they're a little bit slower to change things. It's always tough to know, and still like there's not much you can do when you're using the multiplier system unless you put guys over 2x. It's a lot tougher than the salary cap format. But they kind of keep it where you can use the core plays, the good guys, the Lukas, the Giannis's, the Dames, the Currys, LeBron, any given night. That's kind of how they do that. So Luka is questionable, doubt he plays. Again, we're early on in the day. I'm trying to give you all the information I possibly can this early on in the day. But yeah, if Luka doesn't play, that obviously changes things around. That's why I'm giving you other options at forward with Zion and Ingram. But yeah, in cash, like I still plan on using Luka unless he doesn't play, in which case it's an easy swap over to Zion, or if you want over to Porzingis if he ends up playing. But Porzingis, if Luke is off, he's probably going to eat up all the usage matchup versus OKC. Still should be a close game. I don't have him up highlighted right now because I don't plan on playing him if Luke is playing, but things can change pretty quickly. Outside of that, like Draymond, I already mentioned 3 points for a block and steal. 1.45x isn't quite high enough, but a matchup versus Portland is a perfect spot where he can end up with a triple-double, 10 boards, 15 assists, 10 points, and he can get a few blocks and steals in there and end up crushing. We see his ceiling pretty darn high. Kuzma, I already talked about him. Oubre, not quite making my builds yet, although I'll never argue it. Portland, one of the worst defensive teams in the league. He's got a 1.5x multiplier. Very volatile, so always in play in tournaments. Definitely a guy who will have 1 or 2 shares of a night, but not really in my tournament core. John Collins, talked about him. Bagley, match versus Lakers. Like maybe he gets some extra run. We always know his minutes are a little bit volatile, but he's been playing a lot recently. So matchup versus Lakers, where people might be off of him, I can see him putting up a pretty big night. After that, like Wiggins, he's fine, not great. Kristaps, he's fine. He's great if Luka's out, but as of right now, assuming he's playing, fine. Horford, little low multiplier, probably not going there. Rashawn Holmes, probably not going there. So any one of these guys are probably in play for tournaments. As you can see, all their ceilings are around 60 plus. But more than likely, they're going to end up with a not tournament winning score, and they're not going to be playable in cash. So Hayward, now probable, kind of lessens some of the other guys, but that's basically forward. Let's move on to guard here. Again, guys, any questions you got, go ahead and drop into chat. No, I do not play preseason baseball. I've always think about it every year, but I'm always fully entrenched in basketball. So it's just tough to spend that much time on a sport where it can be very high EV, but I can't get that much money into it. So it's kind of tough to play preseason, spend that much time investing into looking at stuff, researching players, researching who's going to pitch, how much they're going to pitch. So preseason MLB is not really for me. I know a lot of people that preseason MLB, preseason football make a ton of money. Jamino's great at it, if I remember correctly, in preseason basketball, preseason football. I'm not sure about baseball, but if you aren't a huge volume player, it does make sense to play preseason stuff. Do your research, look at everything, read all the articles. Because if you're not playing thousands of dollars a day, because you can't really get that in on preseason sports, I assume, then it makes sense to definitely look at stuff. Because you have people that have no idea what they're doing, barely putting any research into it, playing all the best guys that aren't even going to get that much run potentially, especially in NFL preseason. But there's definitely an edge to be had in every single preseason sport if you put in the time and if you know what you're doing. But looking here at guard, pretty simple for me for cash. It's Dame, match versus Golden State. He has a chance to go off for 70 fantasy points before the multiplier. And he's at 1.15x multiplier. Huge upside. Schroeder, already talked about. He's going to be the main guy in this offense. Match versus Sacramento is great. He should end up crushing. And Harden, always a fantastic play over on SuperDraft, even at 1x multipliers. Occasionally you give him at 1.2. But even at 1x multiplier, giving you the floor, giving you the ceiling, giving you the median outcome. Matchup versus Houston, revenge game. It's in Houston. I don't see a way where he doesn't end up taking a few extra shots, uses a little bit more usage, ends up on the floor for the full game. Harden's in a fantastic spot. You can fade in tournaments because he is at that 1x multiplier. There are ways where he ends up with like 40 fantasy points. But in cash, he's a lock for me. It's going to be these three guards in all likelihood, barring some weird news. They're going to be in my cash game lineup. Steph, 1.1x multiplier, match versus Portland. Horrible defensive team. He has 70-point upside. He can crush. He can absolutely destroy in this spot. So he's definitely a guy that's in play in tournaments. LaMelo Ball, Hayward playing gives a little bit of downgrade, but 1.25x definitely means that he's in play. Fox, always a guy that can put up a massive outing, 1.3x multiplier. A little lower than I'd like, but he's definitely a guy that's in play. Trae Young, always can go for 70 points, matchup versus Orlando. He's fine. Kyrie, Oladipo, both have upside occasionally. If you're using Kyrie, I probably wouldn't have Harden in the same lineup for tournaments. So they're both in play. They're not my favorite, but I'm going to stick more towards these guys. Fournier, 1.6x multiplier. Already talked about him. Can play him at forward or guard, multi-position eligibility. Ball, he's fine. Edwards is fine. Both can do something, but probably not guys that I'm going to play a ton of outside of a game stack. Like I'll probably throw in a Zion and Ball lineup, bringing it back with Levine, doing a little mini game stack where I'm planning on Ingram not doing great, not doing a ton. So it would be more of a Ball and Zion game or a Ball and Ingram game. Both of those lineup builds are fine. Rozier, I like for tournaments, 1.45x multiplier. The dude still has 50-point upside. Like he can still crush. A little inconsistent, may end up killing your lineup, but with his usage, with all his shooting, like if he gets hot from behind the arc like he did for that little 4-game streak, he can end up with a 50-point outing, which will get you 70 super draft, 75 super draft, whatever it is, points. SGA already talked about him. Wall, fine. Buddy, fine. White, fine. Gordon, if Oladipo or Wall ends up getting ruled out randomly, you can play him, but he's just fine. Like, all these guys are just okay plays after this for guard. So I don't know. Right now, as of right now, based on the news that we have, these are kind of my core guys here for tournaments. These are my core guys for cash. But I'm not going to argue with a bunch of these guys, especially the guys you see here. Like Gary Trent Jr., he gets hot going up Golden State, fast matchup. He can get hot from behind the arc and end up with a bunch of points because of this high multiplier, because of 3.5 point or a 0.5 point, 3-point bonus. Guys like House, if he gets extended run matchup versus Brooklyn, could be a huge scoring game. Never going to argue with anyone against Brooklyn. MCW, 1.8x multiplier. It's high enough. You can play him. Rubio, high enough multiplier. Joe Harris can get hot, high enough multiplier. Like, these are kind of the guys that you're using as fringe guys that are going to come in under 3-4% owned, who can take down a tournament for you if they just happen to get hot shooting any given night. Do we worry about others resting today, like LBJ is already out before the All-Star break? You always worry about it. But again, just make sure to be next to your phone, have the RG alerts on. Like, know when guys are going to potentially be late scratch, like Kawhi was last night. I'm still angry about it, even though it benefited me. I just hate that the NBA does this, because you can literally, if you know what you're doing, if you're well researched, you know how things are going to go. Like, let's say, I don't know, I'll look at today's lineups, see what. If SGA gets ruled out, Diallo's already out, we know that you can swap over to Dort, swap over to Maldon. If Vooch is for some reason ruled out, not really great swaps. You can just swap over to a guy like Towns or swap over to a guy like Cantor. If Luka's ruled out, you probably, hopefully you have him at the forward position. Might be a smart idea in case you're wondering if there's going to be late news. If you have him at forward, you can swap over to Porzingis. If not, you can swap over to a guy like Hardaway or a guy like Brunson, who's at a super high multiplier. Know what their multipliers are beforehand. If Lillard or Curry gets ruled out, then swap over to Wiggins, swap over to Oubre, swap over to Gary Trent, who will probably be running point a decent amount and will take up a lot of that usage. So know who to swap over. It's really easy on SuperDraft. Again, just full player swap, or you can go through and change, but everyone's a 1v1 swap because there's no salary cap. It's just based on the multipliers. So kind of knowing that is very beneficial for today over on SuperDraft. Right before the All-Star break, if we do get late news or if there is changes later on in the day, definitely something worth looking into. But looks like we're probably through everything. Like I said, cash game core today. I'll go ahead and pull this back up. Cash game core is Vooch, 100% at center. Forward, probably Luka, probably Cat, probably Levine, but you can go Zion, Ingram. For guard, it's Harden, Schroeder, Lillard for me. I'm not going to argue with a guy like LaMelo, a guy like Steph, a guy like Fox, a guy like Trae Young, or Kyrie. Any one of those guys are fine. But for cash, these guys in blue. For tournaments, these guys in green. But let me know anything you want to see on this in the future. Go ahead and drop in the comments section. Go ahead and ask me on Twitter. Go ahead and do whatever. Just get anything you want to see. Let me know. We're still in the early stages of this show, trying to figure out what you guys want to see. So let me know anything. Don't forget to like. Again, get signed up using the promo code Grinders. $150 deposit bonus right there in the chat. Boom. Eli's on it. And they're also running a raffle for 10,000 or 100,000 Caesars rewards points, whatever the equivalent is to $1,000 at any Caesars hotel. Again, they got partnership with Caesars, so you can get tier points, you can get status over at Caesars by playing over on SuperDraft. I am trying to get 7 stars this year over at Caesars. I'm a big fan of Caesars hotels, big fan of Vegas, big fan of Tahoe. They got 43 different hotels across the U.S. Absolutely fantastic rewards program that I'm super excited to be getting points by my DFS play, because SuperDraft is my favorite site out there. Overlay every night. I love the site, and I've been playing it before they got acquired, before this partnership. So you know that it is 100% accurate when I say I love this site, and it's the best place to make money in all of DFS. But thanks for joining us, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for letting me ramble here for 25 minutes. We're out of here. See you, kids.